much. We are at the main tent right now, and we are starting the GMRS presentation in 2 minutes. Thanks.
Well, you want to know everything that you want to know about GMRS. Well, we talk about that. On today's episode, we are Swamp Fox, Overland and Outdoor.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for coming. My name is Rich Lorenzo with Swamp Fox, Overland and Outdoor. I drive this 2017 Chevy Colorado behind me, and I'm a local radio expert. I don't know how I got that title, it just kind of happened. But I'm licensed in GMRS and amateur radio both. I serve with the Charleston County Amateur Emergency Radio Service, and as well as Charleston National Weather Service for their Skywarn program. And so that just essentially means that it's a fancy word for a certified storm spotter, right? So if you got your radio up, raise your hand. Everybody flip to channel 17 real quick, please. So let me know when you're good. I'll give you a couple minutes. All right, hopefully everybody's good. It should be that quick, right? So, what makes someone a local radio expert? Anybody, any takers?
They know what you're doing.
They have a radio. They know how to use it, right? Anybody else?
They're licensed?
They're licensed, that's a good thing. Doesn't necessarily make you an expert, but that didn't work too well. Thought that was gonna be cooler. Sorry, my bad. WROL 204 test. Who heard me? All right, could be that simple, right? So the important thing is that if you did hear me, you dialed to the right channel. If you didn't, you didn't. And we're talking about what actually can happen to make that work, because if you have a radio in your hand, there's a good reason that you should learn your equipment to make sure that it works on the trails when you're expecting it, right? But the cool thing is that you got me to lean on today, right? I've been very, very experienced in being able to set up a radio station in the hardest of conditions, right? Temporary stations, running off of batteries. This is a lot bigger than I typically use. Jim can attest to that. But my furthest radio contact, and I'll preface this by saying not on GMRS, my furthest radio contact is 9,400 some odd miles in New Zealand, okay? Running off a temporary station. And we're actually going to show you how to do that back there after this, because that is a completely separate conversation, right? But my furthest contact is 9,400 miles. Especially with recent events, it becomes even more important that that you know that learning your craft and learning your equipment becomes very important, because if anybody knows what happened with Hurricane Helene, emergency communications is really important, trail communications is really important, right? And so I serve a lot with MCOM. It's where my passion lies, and it's why I got into radio in the first place. But out here, I want to specifically talk about GMRS, right? GMRS is a very, very important radio service. And what I mean by radio service is there are several different radio services. You've got amateur radio, you've got GMRS, you've got FRS, you've got MERS. If anybody's heard about MERS, I'm very impressed, but multi-use radio service. And then you've got the business bands as well. So NCB, God love 11 meter. God love 11 meter. It's not so bad. I actually was an old CBer, and I really enjoyed it. And the main purpose of it was to get short range communication, right? Like, anybody raise your hand if you're an old CBer. Like, anybody, what was your handle?
God, it was a long time. I don't even remember.
It was a long time ago.
Little Boy Blue.
Little Boy Blue.
Yeah, because I was
all right.
10 and I had a CB. So
cool. Yeah, mine was Richie Rich. I was, naturally my name is Rich, so like it was Richie Rich, and it was kind of cool because everybody in my hometown kind of knew who I was. It was cool. You could jump on CB. You had 40 channels, right? You just keep going. You just 40 channels, whatever's open, or wherever you hear chatter, right? And so CB, I know that the big stigma is you have this big antenna waving. It's because the wavelength for CB is 11 meters. So the most effective that you can be is if you have a 6.5, I did math wrong, 5.5 meter antenna. 5.5 meters goes a long way. So If that's hanging off a truck, you know, you got to worry about it a little bit. But the allure of GMRS is how easy it is to use and the clarity of it compared to CB. Because if anybody's used a CB, clarity is spotty after about 2 miles, right? It works when you're in a condensed unit, when you're on trails like this and you have a group that you're working with, and that's why it originally got used on a trail. But with CB also, you could attest if you've been off-roading and using CB, unless you're using a handy talkie, that whip is getting smacked around everywhere with all the trees that we're going through, right? And that's a thing, right? But you know, that antenna is very short. Mine is a little longer on my truck. All that science I'm going to leave out. We'll talk about it later. But can anybody tell me what GMRS stands for? Let's go.
General Mobile Radio Service.
General Mobile Radio Service. Thank you, sir. So General Mobile Radio Service. General, for the masses, right? For everybody. Mobile, you can take it with you. Radio service, pretty self-explanatory, right? And so it is very, very useful because it is for overland communications, wilderness communications. You can obviously see that these two radios, they're here, right? I have a longer antenna because I want one. That's a shorter antenna. There's some of y'all that have other ones. Chuck me yours. That's a different one. So we'll talk about that really quick. But as far as communication, what are some things that you have to communicate for when you're on the trail, at camp, whatever?
It breaks down.
Safety. Yeah, so if something breaks down, right? Hey, I got a problem coming at me.
I'm
Right?
lost.
I'm lost. That's a big thing.
Dinner time.
Last year, March, here at this event, there's a guy who sent a message in the WhatsApp group, right? And I love his prowess. It was very cool. But he actually got stuck out there on the woodland trails, right? Like got mucked up, and then he just threw up his rooftop tent and slept there and says, "Hey guys, come get me whenever you guys get done with breakfast." It was so nice. It was so nice. Yeah, like I think that if he was able to hit us on radio, it'd be like, okay, let's get that guy out from sleeping in the woods or in the muck. It was a great story. It was a great story. And when I heard about it the next morning, I said, that can't be good. So, but no, it's really important. So GMRS, I mentioned earlier that GMRS was UHF radio, right? Ultra high frequency, I won't go into any of that other than the fact that the radio waves are organized into VHF, UHF, HF. There's a lot of science behind it. We're going to leave all that out, right? It's made to be simple. So what I will say is GMRS is made to be between the frequencies of 462 to 467 megahertz. Someone hit the call button. That's great. So 462 to 467 megahertz, right? What that means for you is nothing. I don't want you to know that, right? What I want you to know about GMRS is that it's a channelized system. We mentioned CB. Some of us are old CBers. On CB, you had 40 channels. On GMRS, you have 22 channels and then 8 repeater channels. So a total of 30 channels, right? Total of 30 channels. So it should be as simple as dialing up on a channel and saying, hey, we're all on channel 17. Please make sure that you're on 17. If you're on 17, you can hear me. So right now, whoever's on 17 can hear me right now, right? So it should be that simple. The more complicated you are on the trails, the more difficult it's going to be for you to get contact when you need it, right? I think that's so very important. Keep it simple, stupid. I have heard that so many times. My dad is retired military. I've heard that statement so many times. And so it's very, very important that you keep it simple. I should be able to take one of these radios and give it to a 5-year-old child and say, hey, you're going to the bathroom at camp. Can you please stay on channel 16? Right? And then if he's been gone too long, I should be, hey, little Timmy, wanted to know where you're at. Right? And Timmy should be able to hear me and says, I got stuck in the bathroom. Whatever that looks like. But it's just as simple as that. For us, when we go out on the trails, hey, blew out a tire. I got hung, and I'm stuck. Need someone to tow me out. One of the more recent things with my group. Raise your hand if you're Shantytown. All right, so Shantytown. We just recently took a trip up through Kentucky, back through Virginia to Tennessee and down to North Carolina. This banner right here, not to throw a shameless plug, is because of this trip, because we were trying to outrun Hurricane Helene. We were originally supposed to be going through Georgia on the Georgia Traverse, okay? And so the amount of radio that we had to use, the radios did not stop, because we were dealing with downed trees. We were dealing with, hey, we can't go that way. We were dealing with, hey, 221 is the only route we can take because this is the only way we can get out. Everybody is familiar with what happened in North Carolina, and we happened to be coming back through there with an original plan, and that plan changed, right? Instead of saying, hey, I'm going to call these people up and say, hey, we're going to meet at the McDonald's coming through Linville. No, way too long. Way too long. Key up. My people are there. Hey, there's a tree on the right side, avoid that tree. We had to make a lot of quick decisions, and that doesn't happen on telephone.
Without
on
cell
radio.
service.
And no cell service. Cell service was gone once we hit Tennessee, right? And so we had to make a lot of changes that made a lot of sense, and that only happens on radio. Right now, GMRS and ham radio are being used for all of the emergency communications up in the North Carolina area. When the cell towers went down, these still work, because if I can get a radio signal to another radio that's picking it up, those still work, right? And so out here, even still, I know this is so much smaller scale, and nobody's in such a situation where it's like dire need, but guess what? We can get you out quicker if we know, right? There's a reason that the military uses radio in general. GMRS is for the masses. We can use GMRS. Now, raise your hand if you knew GMRS took a license. Okay, good. About half. That's expected, all right? My GMRS call sign is WROL204, okay? WROL204. You typically have 4 letters, 3 numbers, okay? Licensing is not a very difficult thing. You don't have to take a test like you do on ham radio, okay? So in my opinion, there's no excuse for us not to support the radio service, right? Because it's $35 for 10 years. Anybody a math person? $350 a year, and it covers you and your entire immediate family. So my wife can use it, I can use it. If I had a kid, my kid could use it, right? And you all can be under the same call sign. So, you know, we go through, you can even lay designators. So if you're saying, if we're traveling 2 cars and my wife has a radio too, WROL204 car 1 or WROL204 caboose, right? And so you could lay designators, you can say base camp, whatever you want. The only important thing is that you throw out your call. And I'll give you the small bit of the FCC rule. You have to throw your call sign out at the beginning of the transmission, every 15 minutes that you are transmitting actively, and then at the end of every transmission so you can sign off, right? So it's just to keep everything organized so that the FCC knows who's transmitting and who's there, right? It shows your licensee. Now, I'll tell you where it gets confusing. I'm not the FCC police. I don't care. Not my thing, right? I know it's so easy to pick up any radio on Amazon, from these guys back here, Total Off-Road and more. I actually really support them because they've got some really great options for GMRS and they work, right? And the biggest thing about that is, if you get licensed, it tells the FCC that we're using the service, right? We are using the service. We say $35 is worth 10 years, and I want you to reserve these frequencies. I want you to reserve these channels for us. If we do not show that we are supporting the FCC and guarding those frequencies for something that we all use, right? It becomes a moot point because they say, oh, well, we only have, 465 licensees. Horrible number. 465 licensees. We're going to cut that down from channels for 30 channels to 5. and then that's it, right? So it's very, very important. As much as I hate licensing myself, as much as I hate those sort of things, you know what? It's in place. We got to do it. Let's show the FCC that we're actually using the service properly, so that we can further it. I'm going to throw a really, really fun wrench into all of this. I don't have your radio. Thank you, sir. Hunter, everybody. This is the other half of Swamp Fox Overland and Outdoor. All right, guys. So, out of these radios, I will hold them up. Out of these radios, wrong one. Out of these two radios, which one is a ham radio? Which one is a GMRS radio? Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Yes. All right. Anybody? Any takers? Left or right? Well, my right, my left.
What if it's programmed?
The green one's the ham.
What are the model numbers?
I will explain that. Good call. You smart man. He said, what are the model numbers? You can't tell, right? This model number says GMRS 9R, GMRS 9 Romeo. Okay? He's really cute. This one says UV9R Pro. Right? Now which one is the GMRS radio?
Green one.
Green one. Green one. One that says GMRS. There's no secret. A GMRS radio will typically have GMRS in the model number, right? Because what it's supposed to do, and I say supposed to because I love my Chinese company.
Allegedly.
But what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to block you out from using frequencies that are not GMRS. It's supposed to keep you out of trouble. It's supposed to. But all that aside, it's really, really important that you know how to find a GMRS radio, because when you go on to Amazon, when you go on to some of these radio outlets, when you speak to folks over at Total Off-Road and more, you're going to have a lot of choices. They have business bands for like the racers. Blacksmith sounds really cool. You're going to have like the business bands for like racing radio. You're going to have GMRS. You're going to have ham. You've got so many choices. You're even going to see things that say UHF radio. Well, technically, my ham radio, my dual band radio, can reach UHF frequencies. I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier, right? So, you know, with that, God, I suck at that today. With that, GMRS is supposed to be a channelized system. So, I'm going to pick somebody out who has a radio. Who has a radio? When you look at it right now, you have it on? When you look at it right now, I want you to read what the display says. Sorry, I'm giving everybody homework.
Mid-powered W-band.
Mid-power W-band, and I see a big number. Well done. I love it. I love it. You should see a channel. You should see GMRS 17. You should see the number 17. You should say CH or channel 17, right? You should not see, my bad, wrong one, 462.575. 462.575. You should not see that. Now, the thing that really sucks about that is you can actually switch this so that you can see that. But if you are using your normal settings, you should see a channel number on the GMRS side, right? And that's supposed to keep you out of trouble. I'm supposed to say, Harrison, I need you to flip to channel 17. How many times have we done that?
A lot.
A lot, right? A lot. And it's supposed to be that simple. So we try to, there's a light on this thing. All right. My bad. You're supposed to be able to flip directly to a channel very quickly, right? Jim is a ham. If I need to tell him to go somewhere, I have to say, hey, Jim, QSY to 146.580, right? So he knows what that means, but in the GMRS side, it's not the normal speak. It's supposed to be a general mobile radio service, generalized, very simple, easy, right? So with that being said, if you do turn on your radio and you see anything other than a channel, come see me after. If you don't have the right radio, I'd love to introduce you to guys at Total Off-Road and more, because they've got some really great options. I want you to be able to have the trail communications while you're out there, because we've got like 36 miles of trails that we can run, plus the challenge course, and I want you to be safe. But more importantly, I also want you to have the right radio in your hands for you to use it later, right? So I mentioned that GMRS is a radio service, right? There are a few different radio services, right? I mentioned them earlier. Sorry. There's GMRS. There's FRS. Who can tell me what FRS means? Go. Family radio service. Thank you, sir. There's amateur radio or ham radio. There's MRS, multi-use radio service. And then there's like the business bands, right? So we use general mobile radio service because it is an easy service to use, and it's easy to get licensed, and it's easy to pick up a radio. So quick. It's not an expensive thing to get into, right? But like I said earlier, can you tell me which of these is an FRS radio? 1, 2, 3, 4. 3. Why? Yeah, no, it's shorter, right? Wrong one. Sorry. So it's shorter, right? It's not much bigger. The GMRS radio. This is your big change. I can take off this antenna, right? I can't take off this one, right? FRS has a fixed radio system. It's only made to transmit on 1 or 2 watts, right, through all of the bands. This one, I can throw up an antenna, and I can actually hook that up to my handy-talkie if I really want to. I'll explain that in just a little bit. But this is 8 watts. This is 2 watts. More power, more FARs is a generalized thing. You get more distance with more power, right? But also, can you tell me the difference in the radio services other than power? No? That's because there's not much, okay? Harrison can hear me on channel 17 because channel 17 is the exact same. The only thing that is different is how much power you're able to use. GMRS in general, you can use up to 50 watts. FRS, 2 watts, right? So throughout that entire channelized system, 22 channels, all of the channels are the same. What? For channels, the repeater channels, the remaining 8, it's actually just a double from 15 to 22. And they have the ability to use repeaters. We'll talk about that later. A repeater is essentially a tower or a unit that repeats a signal and can put it somewhere else, right? And so FRS does not have the ability to use those channels. GMRS does, right? And so that's a big, big difference between the two. However, if you have this radio, you can probably hear each other. Now distance, I'll leave that out, right? But if you have these 2 radios, they can communicate because it is the exact same channelized system from 1 to 22, okay? So one of the biggest differences with GMRS versus FRS though is the ability to change the antenna. You can put in a longer antenna. A longer antenna will typically mean that it's receiving the wavelength in a different way, right? That I don't know. I think it's a Midland, and it doesn't come off? Okay, it's probably FRS. It's 5 watt. Yeah, if it's got a fixed antenna, I can almost bet that it's FRS. So, yeah, we'll talk about it in a bit. But I can almost bet that it's FRS because all GMRS units have a removable antenna, right? So, all that being aside, we talked about distance, right? How many FARs does it talk? How far can we get, right? The short answer to this is it depends. It really depends. One of these units, these 5 watt, 8 watt units, right? If you have clear line of sight, you got a shot to hit it, but I can't tell you exactly. But on 5 watts, maybe 10 to 20 miles if there are no obstructions. When you're using it in a truck, is that an obstruction? That's an obstruction. How much interference is there when you are in a truck? You've got FM radio, which is very akin to VHF, UHF. It's just a different portion of the band, right? But you've got FM radio, you've got electronics, LEDs, screw up radio signals. As much as we all love our LEDs, right? But they screw up radio signals. So if you were in the truck, 1 to 2 miles on a handy-talkie, 1 to 2. Raise your hand if you can tell me what you can do to change that with the same radio.
External antenna.
Thank you. External antenna. This little magnet mount that I made a joke with earlier, if you put that on the outside of your truck, you could get 10 to 20 miles on the same radio, right? 10 to 20 miles. Now, if you put a 50-watt mobile rig in there, you can get 30, right? It just depends. Radio is 50% knowledge, 50% witchcraft. So like all of the other factors in propagation, it's very, very different. So the answer is it depends, but you can help your situation, right? You can help your you can help your chances. You can throw up a mobile antenna and get it high. They have these little antennas that you can throw up into a tree and get much higher, and that absolutely helps your distance and how many fars can you talk, how far can you get. But the short answer, better antenna system, better reception, better transmit. More power, better transmit power, getting out to where you need to get out, right? So those are some factors that you'll need to know. The good thing is, for what we do, we don't need to know a lot of it, we just need to know how to be effective, okay? So with FRS, shorter antenna, it's trying to get the same wavelength, it's gonna talk less far. I know that's not proper English, but it's going to go shorter distances and less power, so you now have cut yourself off twice, right? Not a bad radio if that's what you got. You can buy them at Walmart without blinking if that's what you have for communication. My rule is the best radio is the one that works in your situation, right? So despite whatever I tell you today, find a radio that works. Hope it works in your situation. If it doesn't, then change it. Just as simple as I can get, right? But in my opinion, if you have the ability to put a mobile rig in the truck, you lose two things. All right, sorry, you gain two things.
What did you say?
Thank you. I saw your face.
I was like,
Saw your face. He's like, what do you mean? No. I'm like, what do you mean? That's wrong. No. You gain two things, right? You have the ability to put more power in your rig so that you can get out further, right? You have the ability to hook up an external antenna so that you can get out further. Can anybody tell me the third thing? I said two. My bad. Can anybody tell me the third thing? It's actually really dope. Chicks dig it? Nah, that don't work. But all good reasons, right? All good reasons.
Yeah,
All good
you're
reasons.
not relying on like the battery.
You're not relying on the battery. My God. My God.
Hey,
You're not relying on the battery.
they dig it when the shit hits the fan.
They dig it when the shit hits the fan. It's the thing. They're not relying on the battery. Hunter, how many times has your battery died?
I charged it on the way up here.
My God. No. If your battery dies, I can't communicate with you, right? If your battery dies, I can't communicate with you. If your battery dies, I can't communicate with you. It's a thing. I've been berating him to get a mobile unit. He has one on order. It's coming. So it's so important, because there are some that have USB-C. It's the most famous thing for to charge anything from your phones to these things. There are some. But there are also some that have a little dock, and that's the only way it charges. And that sucks. That sucks, because if you're running, what are you gonna do? Now, my crazy self, I'll piece together some sort of adapter that works and hope it works. But let's avoid that. Why go through that, right? There's no reason. So I mentioned something about radio waves, right? If it's like throwing a football. So radio wave is all line of sight. If I'm in front of you and I got a shot to throw a football at you, I got a shot to hit you. But if there's a wall in the way, there ain't no way, right? And so that's the best way that I can explain it, is radio is line of sight. If I can see it, I can hit it. So you got somebody on top of a mountain and looking down and saying, I need to hit that guy over there. Well, I might be able to hit 30, 40 miles on a handy talk, maybe, because it's going straight down. But you throw trees, you throw a truck in the way, you throw a wall in the way, you throw city interference, dude, I might be able to get you a mile down the road, right? It just depends. But radio is all line of sight. So if you can see it, you can hit it. The higher you get your antenna, you got a better shot, right? So everything that I've been talking about kind of all comes in together. So when you're on a hiking trail, you know, trees aren't going to affect it that much because radio waves are going to go around it, right? But also give yourself the best opportunity for your radio to work when it's supposed to. right? So when you're out there, when you get a radio, when you're using a radio, test out its capabilities. Let's see how far it goes. In a situation like this, what makes the most sense? When we were running the Helene loop and camping and whatnot, we had a lot of breakaways where it was like, hey, we got to scout down this trail. You guys stay here. I'll radio back. There was one moment that Harrison scared the hell out of me, and we found a campsite. We had to cut our way into this forest road because it was the best shot that we had when we were in Tennessee. And we found a campsite, but it was a little tight for the 4 of our rigs. And so Harrison's like, I'm gonna go a little bit further down the trail, see if we can find something. We lost him about a mile and a half down the road, and I'm like, WROL 204, Harrison, are you out there? Nothing. WROL 204, this is Rich. Harrison, are you out there? Nothing. What did I say? Jonesy, go get him. I don't know where he's at. Because at that point we had been through so many changes and so many things, and we didn't need anybody to get stuck out there and not know. We didn't want to assume that he was okay. Let's make sure that he's good, right? And so that's a prime example of where the limitations of radio waves were a thing. Sir?
I will say, if I had a setup inside of the truck, I would have been able to hear him perfectly clear, but I was using the tiny little FRS radio that only gave me about a mile. So.
It goes both ways. Your antenna is built for transmit and receive. It is a transceiver, right? It's made for receiving and it's made for transmitting. It goes both ways. So if you have a setup, the antenna longer possibly has the ability to receive better, but also to transmit. So you kind of cut yourself off both ways. You can't have it. It's not like I have enough power to reach it to him. Well, he doesn't have enough power to get out to me. But also, if he doesn't have enough to receive me, he's not going to hear me. I know that sounds like witchcraft. It's because it is, right? So that's a big thing. It's a really, really big thing. So all that aside, I also think that it's really important that even if you have a mobile rig, you keep a handy talkie in the truck at all times, right? You never know when you're going to need it for different things. You never know when you're going to have to get out of the truck. So this is your different purpose. You never know when you're going to have to get out the truck and scout a trail, walk down, right? Because when we were stopped by that tree, there wasn't any way that the rigs were going to get through unless we took a chainsaw, which we eventually did, right? But you had to make it down that trail to see if it was worth going down. You know, not everybody has a drone that they can throw up. We did that too. But also, there's nothing like walking down there and physically seeing an area if you're going to go down it so that you can camp, right? Really, really important there. So always important to have a handy talkie in the truck at all times, okay? All right, so let's talk about real quick call signs and licensing, right? We talked about the $35 over 10 years with the FCC. I can help you with that. We have a great primer up on our YouTube channel about the simple pieces about GMRS. So essentially, you got the better part of it because I think there's a lot of information in this. But also, we have a link to the FCC where you can get your licenses. It's so important to do, again, so that you can make sure that we're reserving these frequencies, reserving these channels for use, right? But all that aside, it's very, very important to understand the radio protocol because it helps keep order on the radio. So like out here, we got a lot of people running around, right? So if I know someone's using it, shift frequencies, shift channels. Hey, there's someone on 15, we should probably go to channel 8. Whatever that looks like, right? And so it's as simple as saying, hey guys, there's somebody on here, this frequency is in use. Oh, my bad. I'm gonna change channels, right? Very, very important. And then when you do that, sign off so they know you're gone, right? WROL 204, clear of this channel, switching to channel 18. Whatever that looks like, right? So also, I'm going to speak on a very taboo thing to me with GMRS because this is the #1 question that I get when they say, oh, you say that it's 22 channels and 8 repeater channels, but this one says it has 300. It's kind of ridiculous because there are privacy tones that you can put in to a GMRS radio. While I kind of support it, I hate how complicated it is for a simple service because you ever heard a touch tone phone? Like you hit a button, one sounds like bah, two sounds like bah. It's different, right? those tones actually can encode what your radio can receive and transmit. But the question is, do you know how to program it? I'm not going to teach you that. What I will tell you is those tones can be really useful. I do not see Campbell. When you're at a place like Windrock, anybody familiar with Windrock? It's a cool place. It really is a dope place. There's a lot of people running those trails, and they're all running GMRS, all of them, right? And so the issue is 22 channels only goes so far when you got like 400 people on the trails, you know? So at that point they started using these privacy tones so that they can say, okay, well, we're going to use this side of the radio, we're going to use channel 17 with tone 1, 2, 3, right? You got to know how to put it in. Everybody in your group has to know how to put it in. The best thing that I can say is read your manual, know how it works if you want to use it. I don't love them, but I understand their purpose, right? That's kind of bordering up on amateur radio territory. So be careful about what you're buying and be educated around the equipment that you're using. So that's all I'll say on privacy tones. I am very aware of them. I kind of support them, but also I don't want to overcomplicate this, because this is made to be beginner to intermediate and a simple system that's supposed to work when you want it to, right? Also, if you forget to take the privacy tone out and you get in trouble, you're not getting out. You're not getting out unless someone has that same privacy tone there, and you just defeated the purpose of why you had a channelized system that is supposed to be uniform, right? So be very, very careful with all of that, okay? Again, if you do not know if you have a GMRS rig in your hand, come see me right after this. I'd love to talk to you. We are actually also doing a ham radio demonstration back here at 10:30. You'll get to see us throw a wire in a tree and contact some cool stuff. I'm hoping to get some other countries. But with this specifically, I appreciate you guys for being here. I want to open up the floor for any questions that you might have that does not have to deal with programming and radio. Go.
Can you talk a little bit about the repeater system? I often
Sure.
have it on scan, and I was letting the update and said, hey, check in. You know?
Yeah. No, the repeater system actually kind of borders on ham radio territory, and I kind of like it because it is more accessible than ham because you don't have to take a test. So to your point, up in North Carolina, they've got GMRS repeaters up in the mountains just as much as they have ham radio repeaters, right? A repeater is essentially a unit that is to repeat a signal. Could be high up on a tower, could be in someone's house, just depends, right? So the repeater channels, and forgive me for not knowing exactly, I don't use it a lot on GMRS. I want to say there's channels 15 to 22 is where, am I right? Thank you, sir. 15 to 22 all have a separate repeater channel, right? In order to get into it, let's say channel 16, that's the one I know the best, the receive frequency and the transmit on simplex, on the single channel, is 462.575 megahertz. Everything is related to a frequency, right? 462.575 megahertz, okay? For using the repeater, you have to receive on that frequency and you transmit on a different frequency. Forgive me for not knowing, but I want to say that the transmit is sorry, I can't count. I'm not going to pretend I know that. So you have to transmit on a different frequency. They call it a frequency shift. So when I hit the button, when I hit push to talk, it is transmitting on a different frequency, right?
That's duplex.
That's duplex. Thank you. Yeah, duplex. You're transmitting on a different frequency. You have a different uplink and a downlink, right? And so, thank you. Different uplink and a downlink. So, short answer is, if you're transmitting on the receive frequency into a repeater, it's not getting repeated. But if you're transmitting on the correct frequency, it's going to get repeated through the frequency that people are supposed to receive on. Does that help?
Yeah.
So, if you...
I was wondering too, how can you use it as an emergency? You know, what's the best way to send a distress call? If you're in an area with repeater, somebody can hear your distress call in Washington State or whatever.
Absolutely.
Which is fine.
Absolutely.
You can tell them where you are, but
It's
is that kind of what it's for?
Yes and no. The best distress call is the one that gets out, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can hit a repeater, that's great, because the repeater will essentially take that signal and spread it out to wherever it can reach, right? Think about a cell tower. Like, there's so many cell towers everywhere because it's going from tower to tower to tower to tower to tower, right? And there's a linkage. So what could be really cool, and what typically does happen, is that repeater system may be part of a network that has a bunch of repeaters connected. So repeater here in West Ashley, which there is not one, there's no GMRS repeater here in Charleston. But your repeater in West Ashley might connect to a repeater over in Mount Pleasant. They have some of that set up in the mountains. I don't play with the GMRS repeaters a lot because I typically defer to ham radio for that. But in a distress call situation, you can literally say, hey, this is WROL 204, I'm in trouble, here's my location, I have 1 day of food left, can you please help? And to be fair, there was a lot of that happening up in North Carolina. And so to your point, when you need to put out a distress call, the best radio and the best signal is the one that gets out, right? And so to your point, you put it out there and hopefully somebody can contact you back, right? That's as best as I can explain it. There are so many different ways and usages to use. GMRS is a great service. It has its limitations because of how far UHF radio can travel. It's shorter, but it's clearer, right? But you'll see in a little bit when we switch to ham over here, I'm going to throw up a wire that's literally 66 foot, right? I can reach a long way with that in a different sense. But the biggest thing is somebody going to hear you? And that's a big question, because someone that is going to hear you has to have the radio on and has to be monitoring that channel, right? So it goes two ways. You can get out, but who's going to hear you? And I'll tell you, when it comes to emergency communications, that's where ham excels, right? Because you have several different bands. You don't just have that 462 to 467 megahertz. Nobody, the people that are listening, I'll ask the question. When you're out here on the trails, you're typically listening to one channel, right? Or you switch. And then what happens after you're done? You cut it off, right? There are hams out there that are sitting there listening at any time because it's a hobby. They're experimenting with antennas. They're some of these guys are running, a freaking kilowatt of power going out. Like, I hear a guy in Serbia that is literally testing out his stuff all the time, and he can hit anybody in the world, right? But it's because he's using a different band and a different type of radio, right? So I'm not knocking GMRS. It has its place. It has a good place. And especially in more rural areas, GMRS is used a lot, especially in mountain areas. My wife is from Colorado. They have GMRS everywhere in Colorado. They have great networks. But here, the closest GMRS repeater's in Andrews, right? It doesn't help us a lot around here. So if I'm in the truck trying to hit somebody, I can probably hit you 10, 20 miles, and that's it. And so, is that going to get out? It'll get out. But is someone going to be listening to come get me? Is somebody going to be listening to my call? Right? And so the answer is, it depends. I hate to be that vague about it, but it really is that. Sir.
Getting back to the repeaters, the ham radio repeaters, I just got a text from the Trident Amateur Radio Club. They're on the Monk's Corner Emergency Operations Center repeater 145.490.
Yep.
They're listening for us.
Cool.
So whenever you want to call.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. We're going to do that separately. But I'm a little over my time, so I'm gonna take one more question if anybody's got one, and then we're gonna call it, and then we're gonna transition. Anybody? Guys, thank you guys so much for listening. My name is Rich with Swamp Fox Overland and Outdoor, and you guys have been awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you all for watching. If you like what we're doing out here, please be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell to be reminded that we're out here. And, as always, we are Swamp Fox Overland and Outdoor.